Welcome back to Comic Cappers. Today we will be capping the second issue of Absolute Martian Manhunter. With that said, grab a snack, sit back, relax, and enjoy the ride. John Jones is caught in a mental storm, his perception fractured between his reality and the delusions of a dying mind. He's witnessing a gruesome, subconscious game show playing out inside the shooter's head. It's a nightmare of high-stakes greed and blood as the shooter's psyche fixates on a spinning wheel, desperately chasing a jackpot that doesn't exist. Suddenly, the alien consciousness, the true Martian, cuts through the static. That familiar, cold, eye-shaped silhouette manifests, signaling a shift from observation to total control. John stares into the abyss of the shooter's trauma, his face splattered with blood as he anchors himself. He's not just watching, he's deconstructing the delusion piece by piece. He stands in the center of the shooter's bedroom, a shrine to conspiracy and paranoia. Surrounded by posters screaming about alien intelligence and surveillance, John prepares to dismantle the shooter's reality entirely, proving that the only thing more dangerous than a conspiracy theorist is the alien who can make their worst fears manifest. John is reeling, the sensory input is overwhelming, and his physical body is struggling to maintain its composure amidst the psychic noise. He lights a cigarette, a desperate attempt to ground himself in something tactile, something human, while the internal voice mocks him. But the cigarette smoke begins to warp, bleeding into the neon-colored thought smoke that represents the trauma and psychic residue of everyone around him. He exhales, but the smoke takes on a life of its own, a sickly green plume that highlights his detachment from the reality of the city streets. John stands frozen in the middle of a crowded street. The Martian entity looms over him, a colorful, shifting mass of alien consciousness making a terrifying declaration. He's losing the battle to keep his two lives separate. He mutters to himself, fighting to suppress the alien influence, but his frustration is boiling over. The Martian entity isn't just a voice anymore, it's a parasite, and it's getting louder. It mocks his human resistance, forcing John to lash out in a desperate, futile attempt to silence his own mind. John is spiraling, his internal monologue desperate to regain a sense of normalcy. He fixates on the idea of returning to hospital, as if a medical diagnosis could explain the alien entity currently dismantling his psyche. But the Martian voice is cold, clinical, and terrifyingly analytical. It warns that total understanding of his own existence would lead to immediate self-destruction. The psychic pressure is mounting, and John is losing his grip on the world around him. John finally snaps, shouting at the invisible intrusion, demanding to be left alone, while the chaotic city environment only adds to his sensory overload. The entity forces a moment of stillness, physically manifesting as a green, ethereal tendril reaching toward John's face. It commands him to be calm, effectively hijacking his nervous system to stabilize the situation. To keep John compliant, the entity begins to feed him comforting, core memories. We see the warmth of his honeymoon with Bridget, an anchor to his humanity that keeps his world from shattering completely. It's a calculated manipulation. The entity uses the comforting sensory memory of his mother's cinnamon rolls to soothe his panic, proving it knows exactly which buttons to push to keep its host functional. Finally, it floods his brain with synthetic chemical euphoria, serotonin and oxytocin, leaving John essentially drugged by his own passenger. He is being rewritten from the inside out. The internal panic finally breaks. John is eerily calm now, the entity having successfully suppressed his human anxiety. He's actively trying to debunk his own existence, pointing to the scientific reality that Mars is empty and alien-free. He's desperate for a grounded diagnosis, insisting the pressure in his skull is just human stress, not a cosmic passenger. The entity cuts through his denial. It's not about geography, it's about a concept, a way to categorize something that defies human understanding. John's mind is flooded with a vision of a realm so far beyond our universe that light hasn't even reached us from it yet. It's pure, radiant thought. The cosmic vision shatters, replaced by the grating, rhythmic honking of city traffic. The human world is loud, messy, and immediate. The Martian entity is back in the driver's seat, and it is not interested in John's personal life. It coldly notes the parents are already dead, pushing John toward the impending tragedy on Serta Street. John's external reality is becoming a mirror for his fractured internal state. The Martian makes it clear. The chaos inside his head is bleeding directly into the physical world. John finally snaps, demanding to know what this entity wants. The Martian's response is a terrifying, fragmented list of conflicting directives. It is here to hunt, to kill, to save, and to heal all at once. We cut to a chilling, silent observation. The Martian entity views the human race as being under attack. It's a detached, almost predatory perspective on the fragility of human life. John's psychic intrusion causes a public scene. A mother, terrified by John's sudden, erratic behavior, screams for him to get away from her child. the facade completely crumbles. The psychic barrier breaks, and the full, overwhelming weight of the panic comes roaring back, leaving John once again at the mercy of his own fractured mind. John walks through the city, his internal Martian persona questioning the very concept of being under attack while he navigates the mundane street life. The Martian entity demands control, forcing John to activate his Martian vision. It's an invasive clinical command, a push to see the world not as it is, but as a collection of data points ripe for judgment. John's mind is flooded by the terrifying, chaotic stream of consciousness from those around him. It's a sensory nightmare of dark, impulsive thoughts, violent memories, deep-seated insecurities, and the fractured, desperate desire just to make it home safely. The Martian entity consumes it all, labeling humanity as a mess of bad vibes that it feels compelled to dissect. John Jones stands on the street, his alien perspective forcing him to confront the absurdity of human superstition as he stares down a Madame Xanadu psychic reading sign. The city around him erupts into a sensory overload of neon-drenched concepts. It's not just noise, it's a tangible, toxic buildup of human misery that John is now forced to quantify as cold, hard data. John tries to process the term bad vibes, but his Martian intellect quickly shifts from observation to analysis, concluding that this massive spike in societal instability isn't organic, it's the result of outside interference. Finally, the Martian entity reaches a chilling, clinical verdict. It views the coming collapse as an inevitability that demands a solution, and the words heal, redeem, save, kill, hunt suggest that John's definition of saving humanity might be far more terrifying than we ever imagined. John Jones is physically being pulled along by his own internal directive, moving through the streets toward a destination he doesn't fully comprehend yet. He passes a shop window, and the screens inside seem to mock him with alien imagery, feeding him data about his mission. Trigger Taylor is already on his way to Serta Street. John's human mind is fracturing under the weight of this forced, alien synchronization. As he walks, the world around him dissolves into a psychedelic mess of colors and silhouettes. The Martian entity isn't just taking the wheel, it's upgrading John's perception, treating his human consciousness like a piece of hardware that needs a firmware update. The entity starts force-feeding John a memory from his childhood, a voyeuristic glimpse through a fence that feels deeply intrusive. It's a snapshot of a neighbor, Mrs. Donnelly, sunbathing, a raw, private moment that highlights how the Martian entity weaponizes John's own past to keep him compliant and distracted while it pursues its own cold, clinical agenda. John Jones is at his breaking point, verbally lashing out at the Martian entity that's hijacked his life. The entity, cold and detached, treats human labels like partner or friend as mere variables in a failing experiment, bluntly informing him that Trigger Taylor has already arrived in Little Damascus. We zoom into John's sunglasses, the red-tinted lenses acting as a filter for his Martian vision. The bustling street scene is no longer just a city. It's a grid of potential targets and socio-toxic data points, visualized in chilling, high-contrast hues. John's human mind is reeling, struggling to process that the entity is actively manipulating reality to keep him compliant. The entity doesn't even deny the parasite-host dynamic, it embraces it, mockingly dismissing John's invader accusation as mere entanglement. The countdown begins. As John takes a drag from his cigarette, the Martian entity prepares to exert its full influence over the coming violence, treating the imminent shooting like a scheduled event it needs to attend. Trigger Taylor is fully unhinged, his internal paranoia manifesting as he screams while firing wildly into a crowd of people who exist only within his fractured perception. John Jones stares blankly, his own reality fraying as he tries to process the chaos. He's clearly struggling to maintain his composure. His phone rings, pulling him back to his duties as an FBI agent. The dispatcher informs him of an active shooter event at Serta and Samatson, the kicker. The Martian entity inside him notes the dangerous link between their thoughts and reality. John doesn't hesitate, responding as he rushes toward his car, the weight of the mission overriding his personal confusion. Inside the vehicle, the Martian entity takes the wheel, mocking John as they speed off toward the carnage, the world blurring into a psychedelic nightmare. John Jones is tearing toward Serta Street, his senses overwhelmed by a synesthetic blur. The world isn't just rushing by, it's tasting bitter, and he's counting down the seconds until he reaches the chaos. Inside the car, the Martian entity is literally along for the ride, perched in the passenger seat with its feet on the dash. It's a chilling visual of how little control John has. He's driving, but the alien occupant is the one setting the pace. The Martian entity muses on the nature of humanity, dismissing everyone as mere pretenders. It views the world with a cold, detached superiority, fundamentally unable to grasp human concepts of distance or individuality. We cut to the carnage at Little Damascus. Trigger Taylor towers over the scene, his silhouette dark and imposing as he stalks the streets, firing his weapon into the terrified, fleeing crowd. The violence is frantic. Victims are scattering and cowering in the shadows, trapped in the path of a man who has completely lost his grip on reality. Trigger Taylor pauses, his eyes hidden behind dark glasses, and delivers the most unsettling line of the issue. "Well, I notice." He's not just a shooter. He's a man who believes he's the only one who sees the truth about the world. John's eyes are locked in the rearview mirror, but the reflection isn't just human anymore. The world around him is bleeding into a psychedelic haze of color, signaling that the Martian entity is fully taking the wheel. Trigger Taylor continues his delusional monologue, his voice dripping with a chilling, detached arrogance. He's convinced he's seeing through the costume of humanity, claiming that even the way people speak is a poorly executed lie. We see the devastating reality on the ground. A wounded victim lets out a final, desperate plea, a stark contrast to the cold, philosophical detachment of the shooter. Trigger stands amidst the carnage, completely unbothered. He truly believes his horrific actions are justified, stating, "In my experience, 99% of people are just pretending." He looks down at his victims with a twisted sense of revelation, offering a final mocking greeting, "Welcome to Earth." As the gunfire rings out, John Jones finally arrives. The Martian entity is physically manifesting, looming over the car with a monstrous, red-eyed visage, while John, still in his human guise, steps out to confront the chaos. John Jones hits the pavement, but his physical body is almost an afterthought. The Martian entity has fully surged outward, a massive, semi-corporeal green silhouette that eclipses his human form as he lunges toward the shooter. Trigger Taylor isn't fazed by the arrival of an FBI agent. He's locked in his own twisted reality, weapon raised, clinically tallying the carnage as if he's just checking off a grocery list. Now, the perspective shifts to John's Martian vision. The world isn't just people anymore, it's a graveyard of memories. He stares directly at Trigger, his mind processing the lingering psychic residue of the victims, these thin wisps of their final, desperate thoughts with a cold, detached precision. He isn't here to save them in the traditional sense. John watches the final flickers of life drain from the remaining victims, observing the colorful, swirling trauma of their identities as they prepare to fade into nothingness. John Jones stands his ground, facing down the barrel of Trigger Taylor's rifle. It's a tense, immediate confrontation, but the alien entity behind John's eyes isn't looking at the gun, it's looking for a vulnerability in the shooter's psyche. The Martian consciousness dives deep, navigating the chaotic mental architecture of Taylor's mind. It's a clinical, invasive process, sifting through mundane human data, childhood hobbies, and long-forgotten friendships to find the specific fracture point it needs to exploit. John weaponizes a deeply buried memory, projecting the image of Clyde Toomeys to bridge the gap. He's not just talking, he's manipulating the gunman's most cherished, innocent past to bypass his combat-ready defenses. The psychological assault works, breaking Taylor's focus. As the Martian entity analyzes the chemical and hereditary roots of Taylor's madness, John coldly realizes that the man he's interacting with is a stranger, even while wearing the memories of a childhood friend. Even in the chaos of the shooting, there's a quiet, tragic end for one victim. As he slips away, the Martian entity observes the final, sacred thought of a dying man, a testament to his faith clinging to him like smoke. Trigger Taylor is starting to doubt his own hallucination. Through the reflection in his sunglasses, we see the Martian's intense, unblinking gaze as he pushes the Toomeys persona into the shooter's fragile mind. The Martian's internal world explodes into a kaleidoscope of childhood memories. It's an invasive, psychic projection, flooding Taylor's consciousness with the specific, vivid nostalgia of a shared youth. Focusing on the physical reality of the standoff, we see the tension in John's jaw. He is maintaining the mask, but the effort is immense. The barrel of the rifle remains steady, a constant threat that John is working to neutralize from the inside out. John's eye catches the fear in the room. He's not just an FBI agent here. He's an alien intelligence cataloging human terror, looking for the exact moment Taylor's grip on reality finally shatters. The question hangs in the air, cold and calculated. Taylor is teetering on the edge, desperate to know if his old friend is real or just another layer of the simulation he thinks he's fighting. John keeps up the act, calmly urging Trigger to stand down so they can catch up. But listen to the internal monologue. The Martian entity is completely detached, viewing the refugee population of Little Damascus as nothing more than pretenders who have convinced themselves they're human. John's Martian vision cuts through the street, highlighting the raw, pathetic reality of human dreams. He focuses on a teenager hiding behind a car, whose final, tragic thought is just a missed chance to play football for Manchester United. The horror deepens as John reads the mind of a woman hiding in the Palmyra restaurant. She's grieving the loss of 49 family members, and in her final moments, she's terrified that her death means their total erasure. To the Martian, this isn't empathy, it's just a clinical observation of strange forms of life. Trigger snaps back, his suspicion flaring up again. The mask is slipping, and the psychological game reaches a breaking point as he demands to know if his old friend is actually there, or if he's being played. Police cruisers screech into the scene at Little Damascus, tires smoking and chaos erupting in the background. Officers are immediately on edge, weapons drawn and aimed squarely at the shooter, shouting for him to drop the gun. John Jones steps into the line of fire, flashing his FBI badge and ordering the police to stand down. He's taking a massive risk, but he isn't just negotiating, he's hunting. Deep inside Trigger's head, the Martian entity begins its surgical strike. It identifies the root of the violence, a level 18 delusion, a classic us versus them architecture that's ripe for dismantling. This isn't just mental illness, it's a structural failure. The Martian views Trigger's worldview as a patchwork of bad ideas and cultural baggage, labeling the entire ideology as Bad Idea 2894, the belief in an all-encompassing enemy. With clinical detachment, the Martian entity within John Jones begins its work. It views the shooter not as a human, but as a system to be dismantled. Trigger Taylor's reflection in John's sunglasses reveals the sudden, horrifying clarity breaking through his delusion as he realizes the carnage he's caused. John's telepathic reach pulls a specific, painful memory from the local victims, Fatima, reliving a summer moment as the Martian probes her subconscious. The entity's influence manifests as a chaotic, colorful psychic storm, tearing through the mental barriers of the victims and the shooter alike. Deep in the psyche, the Martian aggressively hunts for the Bad Idea 2894, the core memory fueling Trigger's violent worldview. Trigger begins to crumble, his grip on his own reality slipping as the Martian's manipulation forces him to confront his actions. John Jones, physically present, watches the psychological collapse unfold with a cold, unreadable expression. A single spent shell casing falls, a final, mundane punctuation mark to the violence that is currently being unmade. The Martian entity isn't just stopping the violence, it's physically extracting the core trauma from Trigger Taylor's mind. We see a literal bullet trailing a chaotic, neon-colored explosion of memories, baseball players, UFOs, and childhood figures being forcibly pulled out of his consciousness. This is the uncreation in action, stripping away the delusion that turned this man into a monster. With the mental architecture shattered, the reality of the situation sets in for the officers and the surrounding chaos. The Martian's cold, clinical intervention has left Trigger Taylor a hollowed-out shell, his violent worldview deconstructed and discarded, leaving only the wreckage of his own fractured psyche. Trigger Taylor stands frozen, arms outstretched as if caught in a trance, while the Martian entity looms over him, a dark, encroaching silhouette against a surreal backdrop of shifting colors. The Martian face appears, stark white and alien, its eyes glowing with a cold, predatory intelligence. It's analyzing the human subject not as a person, but as a biological machine to be recalibrated. The visualization of the Martian's influence intensifies, manifesting as a jagged, white energy spike. It's a sharp, abstract representation of the entity's power, tearing through the remaining threads of Taylor's sanity. Now the Martian entity forces a connection, a literal intake of light and consciousness. It's drinking in the remnants of the shooter's identity, effectively draining the man dry. In a haunting shift, we see a distorted, red-hued visage, a mask of pure existential sorrow. This represents the hollowed-out emotional vacuum left behind once the Martian is finished with its work, a final, singular spark of white light against a flat blue background. The connection is severed, the threat is gone, and only silence remains. Back at the office, the fallout from the Little Damascus incident is immediate. John sits at his desk, head still bandaged, while his colleagues are clearly losing their minds over his unconventional handling of the shooter. They are fixated on the fact that he didn't pull the trigger, and for the Martian entity, their human panic is nothing but noise. John retreats into his car, the internal monologue shifting to something colder and more clinical. As he drives, the Martian consciousness processes the recent events, and the conclusion it reaches is chilling. The situation is a complete failure, and the implications for humanity are grim. He arrives home, the garage light casting a long, ominous shadow. The Martian entity has reached its final diagnosis, and it's clear that the distance between John's domestic facade and the alien reality is about to collapse entirely. Everything leads to this moment. John Jones stands in his bedroom, the shadows clinging to him as the Martian entity delivers its final chilling verdict. The mission is clear and the target is humanity itself. Bridget wakes, her voice soft and domestic, completely oblivious to the alien consciousness now occupying her husband's skin. She asks about his day, unaware that work involved the psychological dismantling of a human mind. John sits on the edge of the bed, adjusting his bandages with a clinical, detached focus. He dismisses her with a single, hollow word, his humanity slipping further away with every passing second. Lying back down, John offers a final, haunting lie. It's the ultimate mask, burying the monster beneath a veneer of normalcy that Bridget will never be able to see through. As they drift off, the human facade drops entirely. We see the truth of what lies in that bed, not a husband, but the white Martian, cold and waiting. The stage is set for the end of us all. And that unfortunately concludes our comic cap for today. With John fully embracing the Martian entity's mission to destroy humanity, how long do you think he can keep up this domestic facade before Bridget realizes the man she's sleeping next to is a monster? Let me know your answer in the comments section down below. Be sure to subscribe and press that notification bell for daily comic caps. Until next time, take care, brush your hair, I'll see you when I see you, peace.